Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Series 1, Part 4 of the Tri-County of Nova Scotia Craft Beer Series. This week, Iron Wave Productions is going to take you to Tusket Falls and the Tusket Falls Brewing Company. In some cases, this beer and the brewery is the most interesting of our five. First of all, it's the newest one. The Tusket Falls Brewing Company has been opened since December 16th of last year. That makes them less than a year old. Now, any business will tell you that the first year is the most critical in some cases, and also the most frightening. And these guys just seem to absolutely knock it out of the park. What makes Tusket Falls so interesting? Well, beyond its age, let's talk about its owners. We have Melanie Sweeney and Jeff Raynard. And these guys are absolutely passionate about what they do. Beer for them is everything, and they absolutely nail it. Why is it different? It's a combination, in my belief, of three things. The first thing is the brewery itself. So the brewery is a beautiful, multi-story building tucked in just off the Highway 103 in Tusket, Nova Scotia. And if you go over off the highway and you go down to it, it's almost a little bit deceiving because it looks like it's a certain size, and then you go in there and whoa, okay. There's an upstairs, there's a main level, there's a deck on the side of it you can go out to, and there's a lot of things to talk about with this brewery that are really, really awesome. So let's get right in there. First thing, let's talk about the fact that these guys also do cans. Now, why are cans important? A lot of people are purists and they say, no. Craft beer, got to come in a growler. Okay, well, as you can see, they have a beautiful growler. But they do things in cans. And so, let's say I'm in Tusket or Yarmouth, which is adjacent to Tusket. I want to buy some beer. Yeah, I can go to the brewery and I can pick up some beer. Or I can go to various stores in town, including the Nova Scotia Liquor Corps, the NSLC, which are all over the province, and I can actually buy certain Tusket Falls Brewing Co. beers. Of the five, they're the only ones to do the canning itself and ship it the way that they do. And I find that very, very, very interesting and also very smart because it's allowed them to reach out beyond the Tri-County. I also really like the approach on the cans themselves, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, before we get into that, people are expecting me to read a bottle. Well, there's nothing on it. So, here's what I'm going to do at Tusket Falls. I'm actually going to come up with an ad, what I would put on the back of this bottle, and we'll see maybe if a little bit of it ends up getting used somewhere. And if not, it might be a little entertaining. Welcome, or bienvenue, to Tusket Falls and the Tusket Falls Brewing Co. Our beer, although new, sits in the history of Tusket, which is very, very old. We love our history, and we aspire to reach as many people in the area as we can with our unique stories, full-bodied craft beer, unique history, and social gatherings. We invite you to join us here at Tusket Falls Brewing Co. or enjoy a cold can of Tusket Falls beer in one of many locations across Nova Scotia where we are available. Merci beaucoup. Something like that. And again, that's just off the cuff, but that's how I see it. So some of my non-French viewers may say, okay, what's he doing throwing some French in there? Of the five breweries, the Tusket Falls one is the most in line with the Acadian community here, which of course is predominantly French-speaking culture. Tusket Falls has leaned into this, and very, very rightfully so, and embraces that culture, which I think is really, really, really cool, especially given that the other four breweries are far more English. This one has leaned a little bit Francais, and it's been good. It's been enlightening for me. I actually live in this region, so although I work closer to other breweries, I live closest to this guy. So it's been good for me to learn more about the place I live and the place that I'm raising my own family in. And it's weird that beer has given me that education, but it really has. And Tusket Falls is one of the absolute most entertaining, especially when you flip the cans around and there's a story on each of them. So there may not be any story on this guy, but there's all kinds on their cans. So you got to check them out. Now, let's get right to it. Let's talk about the beer, because everybody wants to know, okay, but what's the beer like? So we're going to talk about all the beer, because they have more or less five major ones. They also have a sour. I don't really talk about sour beer a whole lot, so we'll throw that one in here too. But currently, we'll talk about them one at a time in the order that I tried them. So usually the first beer I try anywhere is a blonde, because it's usually the most palatable and it kind of, okay, gives you an idea of where they're going. These guys call it Crack of the Rock. And again, there's a story there. I'm not going to spoil these stories. You got to go get some cans if you want to figure this out. But as a blonde beer, it is different, but it has a really neat finish, and I find it to be it's a really good campfire beer. All of these beers actually that Tuscan make are really good for going in the woods, really good for taking on trips, really good kind of getting out there beer. So that's Crack of the Rock. Unmarked Pot. So the unmarked pot is a Belgian style. So when we think Belgian, of course, we talk about kind of an orange taste. They use orange and coriander, and they make kind of that orangey thing. It's unfiltered, so you can't see through it, but very, very potent, very, very, very tasty. So if you like the certain Belgian beers out there, you're probably going to like this one. Next, we'll talk about the Roche de Viande, and I probably butchered that, but well, maybe not. So Meat Rock in English. So that's a place in an area called Quinnen, and that has a really neat story about kind of a meteor falling out of the sky, and some concern about whether or not it was it's a bit of a legendary stone to the point where it's actually been compared by a former Canadian Prime Minister to the Blarney Stone in Ireland. So a really neat thing, and there's a whole another piece to that one. That's a red IPA, and I would say as far as red IPA goes, probably my favorite in the area. Really, it's one of those IPAs that actually gets better. You drink it and you go, okay, yeah, and then you have another one, and before long, four of them are gone, and wow, where'd the day go? But you drink IPA slowly. You don't just bang it back. And for me, that is the quintessential Tusket Falls beer because you go into the brewery, you sit there, and you're there, and you know people, or even if you don't, you go in there and all of a sudden you know people quickly. The Acadian people are very friendly and very, very nice. And if they don't know you, you're going to know them pretty quickly. And that's amazing. It's great to be in there. And the staff in that place are so nice too. And the owners are great. Everybody's on board with everything. But sitting there with that beer and taking your time, right? Don't rush it. Just take your time, enjoy it, enjoy what comes from it. And the people show up, and all of a sudden there's music playing, and all of a sudden there's things happening, and maybe there's somebody's brought some food in, or somebody's brought some instruments in, and before long, everybody's just kind of hanging out, and it's blending, and it's working, and it's just this is all happening. And maybe you've had a second beer, or maybe even a third one. Thankfully, you don't have to drive anywhere. You got a DD. That's great. Always drink responsibly, but enjoy every mouthful of this beer. Even if you first, IPA, I don't like hops, I don't like IPA, give it a shot. You might be surprised. This is different in a good way. So that is Roche de Viande or Meat Rock. The other two I'd like to talk about. One is of course, I'm a stout guy, so stout man, got to talk about the stout. Twice Barrel Shotgun. It's kind of smoky. Kind of has a different take. It's not as thick as some of the other stout. I know the biggest complaint about stout that I ever hear is how thick it is. It's syrupy and it's heavy and it's kind of like a meal. This one isn't. This is far more like you might find in it's not sweet enough to be a porter, but it's not heavy enough to be traditional stout. Right? It kind of does its own thing. And I'll admit when I first had it, it wasn't my favorite. But as I've had it more, it's like, oh, I kind of get what they're doing with it. And at this point, I really enjoy it. But it's not your standard stout at all, which means for non-stout drinkers, it may actually be quite good. And for stout drinkers, you may need to give it some time, but give it some time because it's really, really worth the trip and worth the time. Of course, I cannot talk about Tusket Falls Brewing without talking about what, for me, is definitely the strangest, but also the most interesting beer that they make, which, as some people know and some people don't, is called smoked kayak. Now, little lesson here. What's a kayak? Like in a boat, you sit in it and you. No, no, no. We're not smoking a kayak. This is a little fish, and it's been compared to many other fish, but yeah, kind of that size, so you can figure that out. They smoke it, and it's a very. You kind of just expect it to taste like smoked fish. It's a beer. I think. What? I remember having the beer for the first time, and it immediately brought me to sitting at a campfire because it kind of tastes like you're drinking a campfire. Very smoky. It's called a smoked ale, so it's very, very, very powerful. But the image of the fish, the shack on the can with the story on the back. But if you've ever had the image, the fish, the idea that there's smoked fish in that can is you can't get it out of your head, and that goes one of two ways. Either you love it or you don't. And I got to give full props to Melody and Jeff for this one because it takes a really, really, really big set to do something like this. To be able to say, you know what, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it, and you're either going to love it or you're not, but we're going to do it anyway. It is probably the most Tusket thing I've tasted on that they've ever done. There are days where I really, I can have a couple. Um, Not a beer I would drink a lot of at once, but the beer you might keep the most of, right? Because there's always going to be somebody who wants some. It's such a conversation piece because what is this? Or oh, I've seen more people go wow than ugh. I've only seen a couple do that, and again, they're not really brown or ale drinkers or smoked ale or like brown red. They're more the light beer crowd. Um, so so definitely one for certain people more than others, but try it. You might be surprised about what it does. And again, that's kind of, I would say that's how I would describe Tusket Falls Brewing Co. in a nutshell. It may really surprise you in a really positive way. Because again, they've got these beers and everything's kind of like one there, one there, one there, one there. There's enough space between them that there's got to be something there you're going to like. Not to mention that brewery is amazing and it is just so beautiful in there. You've got to go, even if you don't drink beer, go and check it out. You might really, really love it. Um, the other beer I suppose I should touch on just briefly, because I mentioned I would, is the sour beer, which I believe is called Left Right Here. And I'm not a personal fan of sour beer anywhere, um, but a sour beer goes. There's a real market for it, and it's not a bad beer. It has a kind of I don't know what you call it. I think it probably stems from a lot of the sour beers almost feel like kind of cidery to me. They have those kind of fruits and those kind of notes and things that as a more traditional beer drinker, maybe I'm not super into. But you know what? If you're making it and people are buying it, keep making it. So ultimately, yeah, I think it's a great addition because it brings people in who wouldn't otherwise try their beer or maybe like their beer because they're not beer people. So that's a good one too. Try that one, check it out, and you might also find that that's better than other things that I think are good. So, overall impressions of the Tusket Falls Brewery. Well, the brewery itself, yeah, 10 out of 10. Absolutely brilliant space. So good. The beer, definitely among the most unique in the province. They really have an amazing distribution thanks to the cannery, which you can actually see inside the brewery from the top level, which is super cool. You got to check that out. Um, love the branding, love the Tusket Falls. Very rustic. All the cans are the same way, very rustic, very well and boldly labeled, so you can kind of, the colors are all different. So, oh, that's the blue can, that's the yellow can, that's the red can. Absolutely. Great, great marketing machine. Super, super pumped about what they're going to be doing in the next few years. Just incredible future for these guys ahead. And I know I'm going to support them. I hope you guys all support them as well. And all five of these breweries are incredible, and they all need and deserve your support. So make sure you get out there, check out Tusket Falls, and make sure you go down and tell them the Iron Wave sent you. Finally, next week, Part 5, Series 1 of our craft beer in the Tri-County region of Nova Scotia, we're going to be talking about Boxing Rock in Shelburne. And they have a really unique story and some really different and really amazing things happening over there. So tune in next week, drink responsibly, and take care of yourselves and each other.